That Ain't Hip Hop classic album review. Look, specifically for one Patreon, Mr. Ian McDonald. Thank you, sir. Look, this one right here never really got past 1%, so we felt sorry. So we're doing it.
We said we was gonna implement a new thing, right?
Yeah, he called these videos the 1%ers.
Yeah, the 1%ers.
What? Wait, I thought we didn't agree on that.
It just sounds.
It sounds good.
Yeah.
Me and Myke.
I mean, but we feel sorry. That sounds. I don't know.
Is it not the truth? No politics.
Yeah.
But I thought you said I thought you said you want to do like the hat thing, like we.
That's still because we feel bad because the shits don't get more than 1%.
So explain the hat thing that we're gonna implement. Then.
Okay, so after this, my idea was we're gonna put all of the 1% votes, or maybe anything below like a 5%. Is that what we decided?
Something like that. Just the
5%ers. Yeah, the 5. That sounds. Ooh.
That's what we said. We said we wouldn't go
I
with
ain't
5%.
give them Hotep motherfuckers showing up my door. A whole bunch of dudes with fucking Egyptian dashikis on with swords. No, we're gonna put all the
bottom
albums.
feeders.
Yeah, the ones that don't get enough
You're
votes. We're
making
gonna
this
throw them
shit
in a
sound
hat.
so
I know, right?
bad.
But look, hey,
The bottom
no.
feeders?
In life, there's winners and losers. And on this poll, there's a whole bunch of fucking losers. It ain't no shot to nobody personally.
These are
The
It's
less
just what it is.
popular album.
Ain't you the one that like the drama?
You call them the bottom feeders. Shrimp are bottom feeders. Y'all motherfucking love scrump.
Yep, they do.
So these are basically the scrumps.
Exactly.
We didn't even call them the scrumps.
We could call
We gonna put all the
fried
scrumps in a bag.
The fried scrimps.
Fried scrimp, boiled scrumps, and we gonna shake
The
them
scrimp
up.
basket.
And we gonna pull them out, and whichever one wins, we're gonna do that one. But to start it off, we're gonna start off with Smif-N-Wessun because Ian McDonald is the most unrelenting motherfucker that has ever touched Patreon. Yeah, I respect it.
That was like every single month. I'm like, dang, he back at it again. He back at it again. He back at it one more time. It got to a point where the Patreon was like, yo, bro.
The percentage started going up on this.
Yeah, they started to vote for him just because he was so unrelenting. So shout out to Ian, man. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Anything that is under 10%, we're gonna throw it in a basket, and we're gonna randomly pick out a name. And we'll even do that on camera so you know we're not bullshitting. And the winner, we will review that album.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the Shinin, Smif-N-Wessun. This is my first time listening to this.
And we interviewed them and everything.
Oh yeah, we did during the joint.
So you said this is your first time listening
First
to this
time
album.
listening to it, right?
Cool.
And in 95, I'm like, okay, I looked at some of the other albums, 95, 96, you know, it's contemporaries, what we would judge it against. And I'm like, okay, why is this considered a classic? What did it change? How did it impact? I've never had my hip hop head friends, you know what I'm saying, tell me, hey, you gotta check this out. This is one of the fun. So I'm just like, I'm listening to
I
it.
think it captures, it definitely captures a moment in time, you know, obviously because
Of course, how it sounds.
because of what else was released at that time. So I think because you had, and I just had to go back, you had, you know, Only Built for Cuban Leaves, you had The Infamous, you had Liquid Swords, you had Return to 36, you have all of these dope ass albums coming out, and this was actually lumped into that. So I think when you group them all, I think people are just grouping it all together. And I'm not saying this is a classic, I know we'll get into that.
Okay.
But I think what happens is it kind of tugs, you know, on those heartstrings a little bit. And they're all like, it's part of a wave with all of those albums that were part of that whole golden era of hip hop.
Yeah, but it's kind of like all those other albums that you just named lasted the test of time. Those things are, to me, certified classics. For this to even be mentioned in the same breath as that,
because I think the conversation will go like, people will start talking about those other albums, and then they'll keep going on and on and on. And then we're like, oh yeah, and the Shinin dropped too, right? Remember that? And then but it'll kind of take a while to kind of get there. It doesn't come up a lot, but I think people
It
would
doesn't come up at all.
get to it at some
No, they
point.
don't.
It doesn't come up at all.
No, they don't.
You being nice,
the
Ken.
other Boot Camp Click albums are talked about way
Like
more.
Helter
Black
Skelter,
Moon,
especially Into the Stage. That,
yeah.
I was telling you. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was telling you. I'm surprised Into the Stage wasn't like kind of pushed over this album because
Absolutely.
Into the Stage was like I was mentioning y'all. It was like the Chronic where it set everything up. Like Chronic was like doggy style, dog pound. Into the Stage.
Yep.
It set a sound because you got to think this was the Beat Miners. Like
they put these dudes on their album.
On their
And
album.
that's
I know, that
what
was
keep them
their-
on.
that's what- debut,
Helter
right?
Skelter,
Yeah.
original Gun Clappers,
In
like
90,
in 93.
yeah.
So it set that off, and like I'm surprised. Like I mean, yeah, The Shinin' it's a solid album, but it's nowhere near a classic. I mean, Bucktown is dope as hell. Still Standing is still is dope as hell.
Recognize was
Recognize was
like the biggest
yeah. I think Bucktown probably was.
No, Recognize. I thought
think
you're
so.
probably right.
No, I'm just-
I thought
Recognize was a single. It was a
especially
single.
when they switched up and they used that different beat.
Yeah.
The Just the Two of Us.
Yep.
But Bucktown is
Bucktown was
the
it
one.
though. That was the one because you
That
had
was the one.
you had
That's one with Bucktown.
Down home of the original gun clip. Yeah, that one.
You don't even hear it in the underground world.
I don't either.
Wow.
I don't either.
No, I mean if somebody says, oh man, I was listening to Shinin yesterday. Oh yeah, man, I was cool.
Yeah,
That's
that's
kinda
it.
It's I've never heard this mentioned as a classic.
I think it does come up. It just doesn't come up often.
But you're
never
talking like
come up.
you're talking like this is
Really?
Then what you're saying is this is like a B list or C list.
Yeah,
Album.
I think it's mentioned in addition to the other more popular, more recognized albums.
But I was talking about with B. Didn't they do like an anniversary on this album? An anniversary version or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, they do an anniversary on all albums that come out if it's hitting like a 20th or 25th year anniversary.
Yeah, but I thought it was prominent though. Like I thought it was a reason as to why they were doing it because people, were on it like that.
It's just because it's an anniversary of an album, and
This
they
is a
just,
regional thing, clearly.
Yeah.
This
I
is
know.
one of those albums that's
if you-
isolated to New York.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that this is one of those nationwide recognized classic albums. That's not saying it's a bad album because it's a good album.
Right, and I don't want nobody to think
Yeah.
that we're just shitting on the
Nah.
album, but just
Nobody's
like to
shitting
say,
on it, but
to
it's
say
not a
it's not a classic. It's not like I say. What got you? Like we talk about Into the Stage way more, and like I think I told Candace, I said this is the first time. This is the first classic album that we've done where I actually had to go back and listen to. Me
too.
Because I haven't listened to it in so long.
It's been like 15 years.
Every classic album we've done, I'm like I don't gotta listen to it because I've listened to this album a million times. When it came out up to now.
Y'all bring up something interesting then. So are we saying that regional sounding albums can't be classics?
Nope. Nope, that's not what we're saying.
So
No, I'm
okay.
just saying that I think that
This was a classic.
this
only
was
in
a
New York.
classic maybe in New York.
But that's a
Because-
regional thing.
But into the
I'm not-
stage. Oh, I'm sorry.
But I'm not saying that this can't be a classic for New York, but you can't force the rest of the nation to recognize it that way. Because
But that's what I'm asking then.
You said can it not? Okay, I see what
Yeah,
I see what your question is. Yeah, I don't think so. Because I mean, Because the thing about it is, what did this album really do in New York? Because we're talking about the conversation of, because Ken keeps saying that it gets brought up just eventually. I think that really only happens for dudes in New York, dudes in Timbs and are still wearing FUBU hoodies.
And maybe that's where I probably see some of those conversations from
Exactly.
people from, that area.
But I'm saying I don't see that happening personally. I don't see that happening anywhere else.
So take a group like Hieroglyphics, which is kind of like a regional thing as well to me. Well, I won't say regional because they had kind of like an East Coast sound.
Hieroglyphics is worldwide.
They had
Is
a
it though?
big-ass hit.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You did not know that.
Hieroglyphics is worldwide. You will find motherfuckers in the smallest town of Ireland wearing.
But
a
I think
fucking
that'll happen with them too though.
I absolutely do not.
I thought they said they
don't
did
think so.
well overseas.
They probably
Everybody
did
does
well,
well
sure.
overseas.
But I don't think that if you're having conversations about classic albums, I do not think that this album is going to come up very often at all.
But if you're talking about good albums in 95 or in the 90s, then
Yes.
it'll come up. And,
Yes.
and so it'll come
But
up.
it's still B list or C list, meaning that you're gonna list 20 to 40 albums before you get to this.
You might bring this up as a dope album, but I think the issue is I don't think you're gonna bring this up in the same breath
As a
of
classic,
Cuban
of course,
Links
of course.
No.
or anything
Illmatic.
else or
Yeah.
you're just not.
Okay, so maybe so maybe Hieroglyphics wasn't a good one. I thought Hieroglyphics was more regional, and I not saying that I don't understand that they can take that album around the world, but I think Hieroglyphics I think it's almost the same thing. I don't think people will bring it up
Hell
like that.
no.
I don't think people.
93 Till was everywhere, bro.
Right.
I understand 93 Till was, but Hieroglyphics album, like I don't know,
What you mean
man.
Hieroglyphics album?
I mean,
You mean
what-
Third Eye Vision, like the album itself.
The album itself, like I don't think the album itself.
Well, nobody's arguing that as a classic.
Oh, okay.
I think the difference between Hieroglyphics, 93 Till Infinity, and The Shining is that The Shining didn't have a 93 Till Infinity. They didn't have that big ass hit that everybody was listening to.
That's true.
They did. It was only in. It was only.
You will hear Bucktown on like a hip hop station that plays, you know, hip hop music.
They play Bucktown.
Yeah.
But you might go to a party in Atlanta, and the second that fucking beat for 93 Till comes on, if you're, it depends on the type of party, of course. If you're at a fucking club, no. But if you're at a rap party, that beat comes on, everybody's like, oh shit, here we go. And then they'll know other songs from the album. I don't know that is the case for this. You'll know maybe 2 or 3, and that's kind of it.
Actually, Mike, I could argue that you'll probably hear it in a club too because of how big it was.
Depends,
you know, because it's when they do that hip hop throwback. Yeah. 93, because everybody, I can see people running to the floor for that. Bucktown, come on. Not so much, you know. No. But overall, it's still a good album. I think.
Definitely a good album.
Yeah, it's still a good album. There's still a run on here of songs that I like.
Yeah, because I mean, the album still made me interested in the whole Black Moon Boot Camp clique, you know, as a whole. Anyway, you know, hearing Sean Price, Rock and Ruck on there, Helter Skelter on there, and OGC on there, it made me interested in hearing what more they had to come out with. So when that album dropped, but yeah, Classic, I was like, man, this is.
That's a reach.
Yeah, that's definitely a reach.
That's a reach.
Yeah, it didn't have me. I mean, the replay value wasn't high. Not saying it was a bad album. It just, like I said, this is the first time I've had to go back and listen to a classic album because I didn't play it to death. It was still the continued run of the Beatminerz because at that time I still think they was amazing producers, and for them to still have their own New York sound, if that makes sense. Because you know, you had Pete Rock, you had DJ Premier. You know what I'm saying? Like you had guys that were like giving you that New York sound that you described, and then here come Beatminerz. It's like, fuck. It's like you hear this shit, and I'm thinking the Subway. You know what I'm saying? It's like with a complete different sound. You know what I'm saying? RZA had a complete different sound. So I think for Beatminerz to still have that run and produce this entire album after coming off Into the Stage, I thought was definitely amazing in itself. I'm just like, shit. What? At that point, I was thinking like, what can these guys not do, and how they gonna still hold up this production, having this sound going forward in New York rap, you know, at that time. You know what I'm saying? So that was definitely a high point of the album.
I think what always used to get me with their production was, especially on this album, was just some of the samples that they used. The Brooklyn one, One Way's Get It Over, which is on the PNC song, that one, some more, but yeah, in terms of that, because I don't think I heard a lot of people sampling them, but yeah, like, you know, it's definitely an album that, you know, I could listen to, but it's not one that I would pull out. Like, I don't think I ever walk around like, man, you know what I haven't heard in a while? The Shinin', you know. But if it shuffles and come on, oh yeah, I remember that. But you know, just going back, just listening to it to get even prepared for this, and just trying to think about like the Shinin' back in '95 and the Shinin' post '95 and the Shinin' in the 2000s. You know, it's just not one that I think, going back to what you two were saying, it didn't stand up. It didn't hold up well at all. But are there some songs on here like when they get the next shit session at I Do Holly, Hallucination, Wipe Your Mouth, like, you know, there's definitely some songs on here that I definitely, you know, bob my head to.
I think Ian is conflating I really like this album with It's a Classic.
And I did message him back and asked him, you know, he hasn't replied, but I'm like, why this album? What is it about this album that keeps you, you know, that you like so much?
Right.
I do know he said, you know, underrated album is I think he said that underrated album, hip hop album that people rarely talk about. He called it a classic. He says, wow, thank you. I'm glad you're going to give more exposure to such an underrated classic album.
Think about what he just said.
Okay.
I'm glad you're going to give more exposure to a classic.
Underrated classic album.
My eyebrow's still doing the rock.
But again, he could still think it's a regional thing.
No, he doesn't.
Right.
I'm just saying he could think it's just a regional thing and not enough people know about it.
If he's from New York, I could see that. I don't know if he's from New York. He's probably just a hip hop head.
Absolutely.
That loves this album.
And loves that particular sound.
Right. We all have albums like that we absolutely love that are not universally recognized as a classic.
That's what I'm saying, the universal thing. That's why I'm kind of getting caught.
Or maybe even regional.
You have to be self-aware enough to not push that narrative. You have to say, okay, I love this album, and just leave it there. You don't have to try to push the narrative of it's a classic
Right.
to force other people
Recognize
to
that this is a
recognize
classic,
it.
yeah.
Like,
Why
if
not?
you're, because it's a completely invalid argument. Like, if you're just saying, I really love this album and I think it's underrated, that's fine. But you can't say that it's an underrated classic that's not talked about enough. Like, that doesn't really make any sense. If it's a classic, I feel like when you bring it up, people's
It's talked
ears
about.
perk and like, oh shit, yeah. I don't think they really do that. Like, even in like the nerdiest of rap circles, I don't think if you say, yo, the Shinin, bro. Oh, fuck! I don't think that happens. And again, that's not a shot against the album. It's a good album. But when you're talking about sound, like the sound isn't really that different from 20 other albums. So what really made this all that special enough to be considered a classic?
Right.
I guess I'm just trying to level with him a little bit and seeing like if it's something that you truly love and you feel like it's like classic material, why not try to get other people to recognize that it's classic?
Because if it's already a
think it
classic,
is.
you shouldn't have to do that.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's true though.
What do you mean? What classic? Name one. Name one classic album that's kind of like teetering that it's not a classic, or it needs more exposure, or it's underrated. Like those things don't necessarily go before the word classic album.
Right. Like you can have a classic album that was isolated to certain like subcultures.
And that's kind of what I'm saying. But go ahead.
There's no subculture here.
Exactly.
And that's what I understand that. I'm just
Like you can say, I always say, you can say Company Flow's album is a classic.
that's where I was gonna go.
That's isolated to a certain subculture. When you talk to indie rap nerds, if you say, yo, Rugged Like Rwanda, everybody there's like, oh shit, I know it. What subculture is gonna bug out when you're talking about
Bucktown?
That might be a really popular song, but I don't think that's enough to qualify this entire album as a classic album.
I was just curious. I did a search, and yeah, people do refer to it, as a classic. I don't know where they're from though, and we know Twitter generally doesn't skew towards the older form of hip hop, but I think
Just put a poll out.
Yeah, I think it is viewed by.
I'm telling you, I know it is because I
people
remember
as
when
a
we talked to
classic.
them. I remember when we talked to them and it was like, oh yeah, the anniversary's coming up and all that. That's why A3C had brought them on because the anniversary was coming up and they wanted them to be there.
But I think things that add to it and why people would feel that way, or the people that do feel that way, is because again of the time, the albums that it was put up against. The group that they were in and the other dope albums they put they put out.
Yeah.
And then them growing up in that time and listening to the album when it came out. So, but when you put all the albums in order that came out in '95, it wouldn't be high on the list.
I mean, maybe it's us. Maybe we're just not around the right people.
It could be the people that we are around, but people do talk about this album, in high regard, and they do refer to it as a classic. And
But
I think
we're
it has to
talking
do.
about a general consensus.
Exactly.
I'm sure there are people
No, I
that
agree
call
with
this a
that, yes.
classic.
Yes.
There are people that call every fucking thing that comes out a classic. And there's also people that say it's a classic because it's old. It came out a long time ago. It came out in the classic era of rap. It's a classic.
Right.
Why is it not a classic?
Why is it not a classic? I don't think it changed anything in the landscape of rap. The crew themselves did. I don't think this album did.
Right.
I don't think that this is an album that stood the test of time. I definitely think it sounds dated. It is good, like B said. Nobody here is saying it's a whack project. This is a good 90s rap album. This isn't an infinite album. It's just not. Like, this album had a shelf life. And that shelf life was up some time ago. That's all we're saying. And I just don't agree that this would be brought up in the same breath as easily recognized classic. That's all I'm saying.
Me personally, I had to go back and listen to it. Like, I don't even remember bumping this album that much to where I can be like, oh yeah, we're reviewing that, cool. I don't even listen to it. You know what I'm good. I listen to this album a lot because I played it a lot. This album I had to really go back and listen to it, and like Myke said, yeah, it did have a shelf life because you had a similar album that we can still talk about today in the Infamous that had still a similar. I didn't even say a similar sound because Havoc was on some other shit on that production, but like a New York album, and like this was a New York album, but it just didn't stand the test of time like the other New York albums that we mentioned in this review already.
In terms of why it's not a classic, again, ditto everything. Like, what did it change? Like, who did this influence? Like, did they spawn any babies from this? Nothing. So even though I know where you were trying to go, Modest, you need qualifiers to understand, to be able to categorize and label something. And this does not hit anything. I don't even feel like you can make a case for any of those qualifiers for this. Because again, first time listening to it, I'm listening to it like, okay, let me get something. What can I get? And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why is this a classic? It didn't give me nothing. Cause even, I'm not like B. Some of these joints that we do, this is the first time I'm listening to them.
But our criteria, it falls short. It doesn't check any of the boxes. I think Mike's description of it being a classic by default would apply here. And I think that the competition that it was up against in 95 definitely pushes this down the list. But it captures the sound, it captures a moment in hip hop, and I think that's why this album, to some out there, especially a lot of the older hip hop heads, would view this as a classic album, because they're gonna lump it into everything else that was happening at that time. But is it universally recognized as a classic? No, because I think other albums that were out overshadowed it and probably had a little bit more to it than the Shinin did. So I think that's why people would, when you throw the Shinin out there, like, good album, but not a classic. So I think that's where that conversation that debate would happen.